My name is Joy. I'm a compulsive overeater. I'm very, very grateful to be at the meeting today. Um, and I think I just want to share a lot of gratitude this morning. I really, really enjoyed the meditation because it really, really helped me to kind of ground myself. And um, I'm going to talk a little bit about um, how it was before I came into OA, joining Overeaters Anonymous, and how my recovery is, how I practice recovery one day at a time today. I had a little bit of a, I don't know, like a little bit of a blip the other day, and I thought, did I come in January 2006 or 2007? I was like, can't remember exactly, but never mind. Let's say that it was 2007. I think that's when it was. So that means I've been celebrating 18 years in Overeaters Anonymous, and I would say this week it probably is 18 years of imperfect abstinence. So my life has certainly been transformed since then. And I think the overall kind of topic or theme of my share is trust in a higher power, a loving higher power. And that kind of theme came to me from having a lovely discussion with one of my sponsees last week. And I think it really, really, really speaks to me, where I am with my recovery today. Anyway, so just briefly kind of to qualify and tell you a little bit about my story. I I think I've been an overeater, compulsive overeater since the age of 3 years old, and I'm 44. So I came into recovery, into fellowship when I was like 26. Um, so that means that I'm still a teenager in terms of my years in recovery. I have more years in being a compulsive overeater than I am, you know, being recovered. And I learned to eat compulsively from watching my mum. My mum is one of us. And I remember her sneaking into the kitchen to take food in the dark, and I thought, oh, that's a good idea. I'll do the same. So I have those memories of like going into the dark, hoping nobody would hear, opening the fridge door quietly and trying to just grab some food. And I also have these memories of like maybe being 5 or 6 years old and checking the kitchen cupboards. If we didn't have enough certain foods, I would go to my dad and say, "Oh, we don't have these foods," and he would laugh and be like, "Why do you need to tell me this?" But that was the anxiety I had from being a really young child. And I used to eat compulsively on kind of healthy kind of foods, but I was still eating compulsively. I was eating all day long. And I also had food in my desk drawer, my little office like desk as a child, because I felt I needed it. So food was definitely a crutch from a very young age. Excuse me. And I wasn't particularly big when I was at school. I had a few extra pounds. I was teased by some of my friends, but I guess I felt like I didn't belong exactly because I'm half Greek, half English, and I was born in Greece. So I felt like I didn't know how other people connected somehow. I felt like I was on the outside looking in, and I just didn't know exactly how to relate. And again, another memory I do remember from being very young that I used to go to parties and I was really excited about food. I always sat very close to the table so I could like check and kind of have like extra food. So kind of moving, kind of like fast forwarding a little bit, and I I got to the age of hmm, maybe it was like in my even my early 20s. Again, I didn't have a lot of extra weight on me because I was very, very active. So that's another element of my compulsive behavior. I was a workaholic, and I don't know how I did it now because I couldn't do it now, but then I was like, I had full-time studies, a part-time job, and I was seeing my boyfriend. I was out all the time, and I did really, really well. I was an overachiever, but I do remember tiring myself out so much that I was dizzy and I had to go to hospital. So again, it was never enough. I had to push myself in order to be approved, to be accepted. I had to push myself, and I think this is what the food did for me. It kind of like quietened, that feeling of like I don't belong. I'm not enough. Do people accept me? I had this deep, deep need to be approved by others. I had a fear of abandonment. These things are still inside me today, but because of program, they're not as loud. I do have a lot more acceptance and a lot more trust in loving higher power. But anyway, going back to my 20s, and I met one of my ex boyfriends, and he was my binge buddy. And I would say he qualified as one of us. And when I mentioned it to him, he completely ignored me, which is fine. But we used to eat compulsively at 10 and 11 o'clock at night. And I do remember when I left Athens to come to the UK to study for a PhD. And I invited my boyfriend to come with me because I was too frightened to be on my own. And we continued to eat compulsively and binge together. And I do remember lying in bed one night and thinking, I must be mad. I must be crazy. Why am I eating so much food that I'm actually in physical pain? My stomach was so full of food that I couldn't go to sleep. And that was like, I would say, the lowest point of my compulsive overeating. And what else was I going to say about that? Something just slipped my mind. Anyway, and then what happened when I found OA? I was seeing a counselor because I was at the university, and he told me to find a self-assertiveness group. And I remember I was so angry with him. I was like, what does that even mean? What do I need to do to find kind of like peace? Because at that point, I was doing the self-help books, I was going to different religious groups. And I remember I had this sadness and emptiness inside me, and I didn't know how to fill it. The food certainly wasn't doing it. Anyway, and then I remember going to my first OA meeting. In fact, there was a little piece of paper, an A4 piece of paper with a biro pen that just said, Overeaters Anonymous, welcome. And it took me 6 months to get to that meeting. And because at that point I thought it didn't apply to me. But when that counselor said you need to find a self-assertiveness group, I thought, I wonder if that's the place for me. So the penny finally dropped. And so I phoned them up. I went to my first meeting. I was late. I was sweaty. But I was determined to get there. And I was made very, very welcome. And I think what really attracted to that meeting was that people had a glow, that they were laughing about the compulsive overeating. I couldn't get that, life was so serious for me, like had the world's kind of like anxieties and fears and sorrows are on my shoulders, and I thought, yeah, and I heard, welcome to Overeaters Anonymous, welcome home, and I was really very teary, and even today that really speaks to me, makes me feel very, it's very moving, because I really do feel that Overeaters Anonymous is my home, and it's the first time ever that I felt that I belong. I'm not judged. I'm accepted exactly as I am. The only requirement to qualify is that I want to stop eating compulsively. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about recovery these past 18 years and how I practice the steps and the traditions of my life today. So I found my first sponsor on 3 meetings in because I knew that OA was my home. And of course, I wanted the vanity, I chose somebody who was thin and tall and blonde and pretty, because I wanted to be like her. But thankfully, I stayed for the sanity, just not just the vanity. Um, and and I remember she asked me, "Are you willing to go to any length for your recovery?" And I immediately said yes, and because I was so desperate. And just talking a little bit now about working the steps and the traditions. So I've worked with a number of sponsors over the years, over 18 years. And I know that some fellows talk about having a sponsor that they've worked with for many years. And, I've worked with sponsees and sponsors. I've worked the steps in many ways, different ways, the workbook, the OA book, and today I'm working it using the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I think for every single sponsor and every single sponsee, I've got something, some kind of like insight. So I'm very, very grateful for all the people who've been with me on this journey. And I think one of the things that some of the insights I've had. So being in programs many years doesn't really mean very much to me because I used to sit on my laurels and say, oh yeah, I've got 13 years, 14 years, I've made it, I know what I'm doing. But that is actually putting my trust in myself and my own self-will, and it really doesn't work. It never did work. And for a number of years, I was putting a lot of focus on my emotional recovery and my physical recovery, but not enough on the spiritual aspect. And I was looking for something else and another way. Thank you.
5 minutes to go.
Not, thank you very much. So I was looking for another way of connecting with a higher power. And what might happen and what's happened now, and it's working so well for me, is that I found a sponsor and I worked with her again, working the 12 steps a couple of times. And I've now found that I'm steps 10, 11, and 12. And I work those the best way that I can, one day at a time. That was really interesting because last year was it was a very difficult year for me because without going into a lot of detail, but I came out as being gay. So I'm a queer woman. After 14 years of being with my soon-to-be ex-husband, so that was a very difficult transition, and we're now separated and going through a divorce. That meant moving into a new house. So thank goodness, I'm so grateful I was able to buy a house. But that meant a lot of changes, and I'm very happy today being in a relationship with my girlfriend. But that was very tough. There was a lot of grief. Again, I hope this is not going to be upsetting to others, but I had a miscarriage a couple of years ago, and I was running away from those difficult feelings, and the food kind of crept in slowly. So I was having bigger meals, bigger snacks, and I was trying to basically deal with a lot of the grief and the loss. And I had some outside help, but the fact that I worked the steps again and realized what it says in We Agnostics, God is either everything or God is nothing. And today I do put my trust in a loving higher power, and loving is so important to me because I kind of grew up with this idea of, I had to be better because I wasn't good enough. And I have this inner critical voice inside me pushing me again and again and again. And today I invite my loving higher power, when that voice comes up, to give me encouragement, to give me hope, to tell me that I'm good enough exactly as I am today. If I make mistakes, it's because I need to learn something new. And I think what's been really transformative is that I've been practicing imperfectly, but a two-way prayer. And I heard so many people talk about that. And I was like, yeah, yeah, sure, it's a good idea. I'll do it one day. And again, I had to come to this point where I really need to try it. I'm kind of desperate. I really need to put my trust in a higher power because, as I said, my self-will just doesn't work. And what I do today is I share a couple of readings with a fellow. I do my step 10 in the morning. I send it to my sponsor and I meditate. And then I get my notebook out and I write a question to my higher power. And I always say, dear God, the God of my understanding. And I ask this question. And my higher power is so loving. It feels like higher powers come back to me and says something along the lines of my dear child, and this is how my higher power expresses themselves, itself, whatever to me. And I hear what I need to hear. There's a lot of love and compassion that comes through writing, which is only for a few minutes. But I almost feel like it is a higher power because, my tendency is to be very strict and very harsh towards myself. So I feel like I'm opening some kind of channel of connection with my higher power for that love to come in. And I've never felt so much connection and my higher power and so much love and acceptance.
It's 5
And
minutes to go, Joy.
thank you. Thank you. I'll start wrapping up. And I think today, I still have some thoughts about kind of like body image or, that kind of thing. But this is where I am in my recovery. And today I trust my higher power has the best, uh, for me in store. And, it's amazing. I pause a lot more often to ask my higher powers' will for me. And I'm a lot more at peace, you know. And I really truly believe that the more I invite love in my life and the more I have compassion for myself, I can then extend that compassion and love to other people and acceptance. So thank you so much for listening, and I pass.